I mean, the figures on this budget are kind of mind-blowing. The whole thing yesterday was just extraordinary, with a budget that had been almost entirely leaked anyway by the Treasury before she even stood up after PMQs at 12:30 yesterday, but then was leaked in its absolute entirety, all confirmed by the Office for Budget Responsibility, who basically pressed send on a document that basically went out online before Prime Minister's questions at midday, and released the entire budget. I mean, normally that document is sent the moment the Chancellor says, I commend this budget to the House, sits down, and at that point they press send, and then all the stats, all the figures are there, and everyone can go through all the fine detail. But no, they did it. I mean, some people were saying 20 minutes. It was an hour plus early, because she spoke for a best part of an hour. I know, when it felt like longer, it's got to be said. First of all, just what did you make of that complete shambles? And the Office of Budget Responsibility chair basically saying he's written to apologise to Rachel Reeves, he's apologised publicly, there's a big investigation. Is that seriously significant? Some are saying it could be criminal.
I mean, I don't know about the status of the criminal law. Maybe it is. That's deeply unfortunate for somebody at the OBR if that's the case. But I think the funny thing is, it's just, I can't remember when exactly this happened, but like, it used to be there was complete purdah on the budget, right? And that was respected by both sides, to the point at which, at one point, an entire budget was left on a bus, and a newspaper got hold of it, and they handed it back to the Treasury.
Yes.
And they didn't print it.
Yes.
Because that was the rules. And the people who've got rid of that are the politicians, because nowadays what happens is the Treasury, as you say, was selectively leaking the budget for weeks. And so, yes, obviously it's not great for the Chancellor that it's been leaked, but frankly, the Treasury was doing the exact same thing. The whole point was supposed to be that the first people who hear about the budget is the House of Commons. That was the.
But also, we all hear it exactly the same time, because it affects markets.
And we hear all of it at once.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a package of measures.
Exactly. Whereas now what happens is you get selective leaks about bits of it and all the rest of it. So I've got very little sympathy with the government, because for once, actually, at least the entire thing leaked at the same time, so we could get a sort of holistic view of all of the measures, including, as I mentioned the first time, that wonderful bit from the OBR where they said actually there was no black hole. The only reason the reason taxes are going up is to pay for welfare.
Yeah.
You know?
That was basically the message. And look, and that is there are two really, really key messages that have come out of that budget. One is that, your taxes are going up if you're working, and even if you are, taxes on the wealthy, mansion tax. Oh, well, most of us don't. We're not one of the 100,000 who've got a £2 million mansion. But I hate to tell you, like the inheritance tax and like the top rate of tax and the higher rate of tax, those taxes that are for like those people over there, they have a funny habit, don't they, of coming down and down and down. And with inflation, as it's been and could be one day again, you could be a very average earner and have a very average home in some parts of the country, and very soon you could end up paying more of these things. These things don't tend to get scrapped. And even if like the Tories say, oh, this is terrible, once they've got that money coming in, they tend not to scrap these things, and the thresholds, as we've seen, get frozen. So, as our previous guest was pointing out, it used to be 7% of people paid the higher rate, 40% tax rate or above. Now it's 1 in 4. I mean, that's an extraordinary change in just one time. So there is that aspect, but there's also the aspect of that, that it was a choice for her to basically, put taxes up, and it's going to go partly on dealing with borrowing, partly on this fiscal headroom, having a bit of rainy day money to spare, but also massively to basically boost benefits by inflation for everybody, above inflation for pensioners, and by on an average of something like £5,000 a year, but up to 14 grand a year for families who don't work or work not enough hours or on universal credit, and can now not be hit by the 2-child benefit cap. But the other aspect of it is the simple matter of trust in politicians. Promises made, manifesto, very clear. The Tories put out a great video yesterday, just time after time after time, of Rachel Reeves, the Prime Minister, all of the shadow cabinet members saying, we're not going to put taxes up on working people. Taxes have gone up on working people. They did last year, and they did again. But the other promise made at the budget, at the dispatch box last year by Rachel Reeves, very, very, very clearly, that she would not come back for any more. That was it. She'd done the taxes. Nothing has got materially worse in the world. OK, we've had Trump tariffs and Ukraine war's not over yet, but still, nothing has got materially worse.
Well, they were foreseeable.
Yeah, they were foreseeable, that meant that she had to put tax up. So as she made it very clear, it was, quote, her choice.
I mean, she has at least stopped making these promises now. When she's being, if you listen to the Chancellor being quizzed on the budget now, she says things like, "I'm not going to write next year's budget." So she is at least no longer lying. But it was always ridiculous because, they made all those promises during the election. Then they got into office and discovered that actually, shockingly, having the grown-ups back in the room and the Tories out of power was not in fact enough to fix the economy.
Because that was their whole thing. I think they genuinely did think it was going to be a lot easier because they were nice people. Yeah. And they were more competent.
Well, they were serious people. I mean, genuinely, the thing is that actually, in my experience, there are very few people in politics who have the kind of sort of sociopathic confidence to just straight up and deliberately lie to you all the time. Generally speaking, if a politician has been lying, the first person they've lied to is themselves.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's what happened here, because it was objectively ridiculous that they ruled out all the big revenue taxes during the general election. And then when they realised they were going to have to raise them, it was absurd for Rachel Reeves to come back and say, oh, well, I won't have to do it again. Because, as I said, you could just look at her numbers, right? And it's the same now.
Yeah.
Because her entire fiscal, she said, I've published my entire spending envelope for the entire Parliament, and it's lots of spending now, and it's lots of austerity and pay restraint just before the general election. And anyone could have just gone, that's obviously not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think, genuinely, she probably thought that would be somehow true because growth would come back.
And the thing is, I've been saying, this is a budget about protecting jobs, but the only two jobs she's trying to protect are hers and the Prime Minister's. They're intricately tied with each other. He's going to throw under the bus what he wants. I mean, there's no doubt at all. That's your last budget, sweetheart. I mean, it's not going to... Sorry to be sexist there, Rachel. But, that is her last budget. There's no way. I mean, but she did please a load of Labour backbenchers. But interestingly, not Labour voters with things like the two-child benefit cap. Labour backbenchers are obsessed with scrapping the two-child benefit gap. This idea, we have to tackle child poverty. You tackle child poverty by parents working full-time and paying for their own kids. You tackle child poverty by telling people who already aren't working, who can't afford the kids they've already got, by suggesting to them, maybe don't have any more kids that you can't afford. And you have tax policies that encourage that decision-making. I mean, it's mind-blowing to me. They think just keep handing out money to people is mad. Bearing in mind, none of the children affected by this policy were born before the policy came in. The policy came in 2017. There was 2 years' notice, and you were told if you had more children born after 2017, they would not be getting this extra. This cap would apply to them unless you had twins and it's awful. You have to say, look, if you've been raped and you had a child. Yeah, I get that. These aren't very pleasant policies, but sometimes you need to be cruel to be kind to everybody, and that's the reality. But they are obsessed with this, even though the majority of people in this country support the two-child benefit cap, including a majority of Labour voters. Why? Because they live next door to these people and they know perfectly well that they are choosing not to work and support their own children.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're not idiots. They can see them.
The reason it's been so popular is because it speaks to a fairness question, which is if you're somebody who is doing the right thing, you and your partner are both productive taxpayers, one of the third of British adults that are maybe net contributors to the exchequer, you've had to max out on your mortgage, right, which means you both have to work, which means that
to buy a really simple, basic house, a two-bedroom...
To buy a worse house than your parents had at your age with a longer commute, right, but you've got it. But that suddenly means your family home, you both need to work in order to sustain the mortgage, which makes having a family quite difficult. And lots of people, including people I know, are like, OK, we're having to make quite difficult financial decisions about whether or not we can afford to have another child. Yeah. And then you have people on the
This isn't about going to Starbucks every day. Right. This is about major financial planning.
Because it costs about... I think the Times a couple of years ago calculated that raising a child from 0 to 18 costs 200 grand to a household, right? So that's a big investment that you have to be able to make. And it's the fairness question of people who are doing the right thing, working hard, paying lots of tax, and then they see other people who don't have to make the same calculations, right? That is always why this has been so unpopular. And on the child poverty point, it is always worth reminding people that what the left have is they have relative poverty. And relative poverty is purely an equality metric, right? Absolutely. It has nothing to do with living standards in any absolute sense. You can lift a whole bunch of people out of poverty, relative poverty, by confiscating a bunch of money from a load of other people and burning it.
Yeah. Well, you could literally make everybody in this country a millionaire, but people who have been various amount, got 1 million or 2 million or 3 million or 4 million, but the people who are living on less than 60% of the median would be counted as living in relative poverty. So they could be living in a mansion with gold thrones, but they're still we'll be told they're living in poverty. I mean, it's just mad. Okay, but we come into this whole thing, it's like the whole, free school meals for like every kid in primary school in London, things like that. Not free, it's taxpayer funded. But the idea, you're giving this stuff to people who, my kid would have been entitled to this. This is insane. Why are you giving me something free? I don't need it. I can pay for my own kid. As can, in my view, every parent. And I don't believe there is a single parent in this country. And I've spoken to many on phone-ins over the years, for instance, who say, look, we've been on minimum wage all our lives, or we're on benefits, and we don't have a trouble giving our kids cereal or a piece of toast in the morning. What it is often is parents who are failing, and that's a different issue. But they never want to tackle that. They don't want to tackle things like, if you really want to tackle child poverty, you tackle worklessness, you tackle the work ethic, you tackle family breakdown. Encouraging people, teaching people how to hold down long-term relationships, to stick together, conflict resolution, and you teach people parenting skills. What kids need, yes, they need to have 3 meals a day, and they need to have their teeth brushed, and they need to have a bed to sleep in and a bedtime, and they need structure, they need healthy food. I mean, I'm sorry, none of this actually is about giving people more money. It's about helping them to help themselves. And that sounds all patronising and Lady Mark, but it's true.
I mean, it's absolutely, you mentioned toothbrushing. This government has now decided that actually schools are going to brush children's teeth.
Don't even.
And the really exciting thing about that is, when is the government going to be first sued for a filling?
Yeah.
Right? Because some school or other has neglected its duty to this child's teeth. And then you read about, I'm sure you've seen this, the stuff about children coming into nursery and reception who aren't toilet trained.
This is something I really don't get. If you are a completely lazy mum, right, you can't bother to toilet train your kid. Okay, which, by the way, kids want to do. They want to grow up. If you haven't toilet trained your kid at 4, okay, unless there is a disability, because you always get somebody go, oh, I know. Yeah. But your average normal kid, there's nothing wrong with them, okay? If you've not, why are you shelling out an absolute fortune for nappies and the bother of changing your child's nappy, right? Why are you forking out for that? Wouldn't it be easier just to teach your kid to use the toilet? Which, by the way, everyone pretty much learns to do, so it's obviously not that hard.
It's baffling, but it also explains, one, you always get people, when I'm arguing the toothbrushing thing with the government, it's popular with parents. I'm like, but like...
Who? Which parents?
Well, like, presumably, lazy parents, and that's a doom cycle.
So we're going to feed your kid, so we're going to pay for the roof over your head, we're going to pay for the food for your kid, we're going to pay for your child to be get toothbrush. And by the way, every time a teacher or anyone in school is spending time on that, they're not spending time teaching.
Well, this was going to be my other point, because we talk about, we were talking earlier, everything's expensive and rubbish. One of the reasons for that is teachers go into teaching to teach, right? And it's a great vocation, and a lot of them are absolutely fantastic people, and instead they end up picking up the slack for a whole load of work that wasn't done somewhere else. And at the other end, it's the same at universities. The number of universities now that have to do remedial maths and English for their first year students, that means that they can't focus on what they're meant to be doing. So we're still paying for it, but we're not getting the results.
Yeah, exactly. Well, a very good friend of mine who's a deputy, so he's now a head teacher of an inner city comprehensive, and those kids coming from some rough houses, and he says, I'm not a teacher. He goes, I'm a social worker come bouncer. I mean, that's basically, crowd control. That's basically what I do these days. I mean, it's all very depressing, isn't it? One person who did cheer me up yesterday was Keir Starmer. The Tory leader was absolutely on fire. That said, I'm going to say, Rachel Reeves, I thought her delivery yesterday was better than usual, rather more forceful. She did say some quite weird things, so this whole, my choices. And she kept referring to Madame Deputy Speaker, which is weird because it's Madam Deputy Speaker. It's just a bit weird. She's just a bit weird and awkward, isn't she? It's just very strange. Keir Starmer, though, absolutely on fire, obviously helped by the fact that they had the budget in advance. She wasn't just responding to it at the time. They were obviously able to rewrite that speech, but she came out fighting. Now, one of the things we know she's obviously furious about, and I'm with her, and I think a lot of strong women are particularly annoyed about this, is a woman who's risen to the top of her profession, Chancellor of the Exchequer, going on about, being the first woman, and then whinging about people criticising her because she's rubbish at what she does, and then saying, it's sexism and misogyny. So I was totally with her on this. You may not have caught the full Keir Starmer speech. Go back and watch it, because it's properly a good watch. It may change your view if you're not a big fan of the Tories and not a big fan of Keir Starmer's leadership. It may well change your views. Certainly a lot of Tory backbenchers were very impressed. Someone was particularly impressed at the Crewkern Gazette, which is doesn't appear to be a newspaper, it's obviously just someone on social media, and they have made a but turns out turned Kebby Badenoch's speech into a budget rap. Have a quick watch and a listen of this.
All we've had from her is wallowing, wailing, self-pity speeches, victimhood, flailing, crying about misogyny, whining about mansplaining. But listen up, Kemi's here, and the roof's about to cave in.
So, Madam Deputy Speaker,
let me break it down clean. Woman to woman rate, I'll tell you what I mean. People ain't complaining because you female on the scene. They complaining because you run the country like a broken machine.
yeah?
If you can't see that, I really you find it on social media. It's absolutely worth watching, particularly in the background. Keir Starmer having a cigarette on the floor of the House of Commons.
Well, I think that used to be, at one point, I remember that was actually a weird exemption from the smoking ban
Yeah.
that they had to cover, because smoking, the House of Commons wasn't covered by it.
Yeah.
So there was the prospect, if we'd only
People
had
just
Nigel
sit there.
Farage in Parliament 20 years before, he could have been the last
there with
one
his cigar.
there
Yeah.
with a cigar in the Commons.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the small ballot. There was a protest outside Parliament as well yesterday, farmers' protest. They were told at the very last minute, on the Tuesday late at night, when some tractors, by the way, were already on the way, they couldn't bring their vehicles into Parliament Square or to central London, and that was bad. Now, I'm of the view that people should obey the law. I know it's old-fashioned, but if we all do that, it will kind of make things nicer, wouldn't it? A lot of people say, well, we're already on our way. You know, these tractors drive very slowly. They set off at early hours of the morning, you didn't realise. Some just went, sodded anyway, and turned up anyway. And they parked around Trafalgar Square and Whitehall, a lot of them. A few people got arrested. Reaching the ban. I mean, the thing is, the police were saying that we need to, we need to not have traffic blocked. But they're the ones who block traffic because they block off traffic on big days like Budget Day or the opening of Parliament, and there's no traffic allowed. In fact, it's quite hard for pedestrians to walk around outside Westminster. So I thought that was a rather strange argument. What did you make of their claim that we can't possibly actually stop any, a particular, a large Muslim community demonstration in Whitechapel in East London, but we can stop UKIP, and we can stop the farmers, but we can't stop pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel protesters outside a synagogue in North London. I mean, they do seem to pick and choose when they do and don't have the powers to control protests.
I mean, yeah, and you think back to during lockdown, right, when somehow they were completely incapable of preventing the Black Lives Matter protest from happening, but there was another one the week afterwards which they came down on like a ton of bricks.
The anti-lockdown one. They actually went after people with batons.
And I think, I agree with you. I actually think that, I am in favour of the police having the ability to restrict protests, and I think that people should obey the law. And there is a perfectly good reason for things like, the blocking traffic, because actually the economic impact of that can be absolutely enormous, right? If you bring London to a halt, it can stop emergency service vehicles.
I don't want climate, just stop oil people doing it either. Yeah.
Exactly, right. But I do think that one of the really corrosive things about the way policing is starting to be seen in this country is exactly as you say, that they always go with the easy option, right? And so that means that if you've got a whole load of people who might potentially get violent, what you actually do is you move along the Jewish counter-protesters because they're not going to make a fuss. And that means that what you've done is ceded the public square to the threat of violence. And policing absolutely depends upon, especially British policing, which isn't like European policing, most of our police don't have guns or anything like that, it absolutely depends upon consent, right? And that means everyone thinks it's fair.
Yeah.
And if you get
really
to the point where ordinary members of the public don't think that the police are fundamentally fair and on their side, our model of policing becomes impossible.
Absolutely. And again, as lots of people are pointing out, if the farmers had Palestinian flags on their tractors, carry on as you were. And the thing is, and people say that's a joke. No, I think it's probably true.
I mean, it would certainly. We don't know for certain, but yeah, possibly, because you see the very, very different way that these things are handled. And the police's argument is that what they do with the big Palestinian protests and so on is that they have cameras and then they go
get people later.
And it's like, but fine, but a part of justice is that justice is seen to be done, right? And even if you are going and arresting all these people, what ordinary people see is you doing nothing on the day.
Yeah.
And again, you're not waiting until the day afterwards to go and get the farmers or the anti-lockdown protesters, right? For them, you seem to be able to go in and make arrests at the time. And
the key thing is the reaction. Again, what's interesting, Nigel Farage has said that Reform will pay for the lawyers for these truck drivers. Apparently, it's quite interesting because a lot of people, the police were stopping them saying, "No, you look like a farmer because you're wearing you're wearing your waxed jacket and your check shirt, so you look like a farmer. And you're not allowed to have this protest here." People go, "No, I'm just an ordinary bloke. I'm just wandering down the street," and it's very. I mean. You look like a farmer.
Sounds like profiling, doesn't it?
It does sound like profiling.